thank you so much for joining us to our March webinar. And this webinar is all about species seekers, where they are sharing their new discoveries, their rediscoveries, and all about all of the South African biodiversity treasures that they hunt and that they find. Our first webinar speaker this evening is Dr. Brian du Preez. The title of his work presentation this evening is called In Search of World Peace, which I love the play on, world peace, world peace. Brian is a botanist, an ecologist, and a conservationist based in Stellenbosch. He completed his PhD at UCT in about 2023, and he then received the South African Association of Botanists Saab Award in Bronze 2025 for the best PhD in the field of botany over the previous reporting year. What an accolade. He's currently a third-year postdoctoral research fellow at UCT and a passionate activist for plant conservation through his online social media posts aimed at creating awareness of plant conservation issues and fighting against the inappropriate developments that are occurring around the Western Cape. His academic passion ties in legume systematics, through which he has described 30 new species to science thus far. He has also rediscovered 4 presumed extinct plant species and found dozens of other rare or long-lost species in his field excursions through South Africa. But most interestingly, when he is not busy with plants, he enjoys keeping fit in the gym, and my best one, pursuing his other major passion, ballroom and Latin American dancing. Brian, what an introduction. Over to you.
Hi, Cherise, and hello to everyone that's online. Let me just share my screen with you. Well, welcome everyone. Let's get going. So, just a brief overview of legumes globally. The third largest plant family, consisting of about 23,000 species in 800 genera. These numbers are increasing every year as we continue describing new species. Legumes are distributed around the world, mostly in subtropical biomes, and are found on every continent except Antarctica. And interesting, largest plant genus on Earth is also part of the legume family, and it is the genus Astragalus with an incredible 3,240 plus species. South Africa alone is home to about 1,620 species in 133 genera. Again, this is increasing year by year. And 65% of these species are only found in South Africa, which is quite an incredible number. And an additional 128 exotic legumes are also recorded in South Africa. And just a brief overview of what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be discussing both extinct species and data deficient species. So those that are long lost and don't have sufficient data. Typically, once those are rediscovered, they are put into one of the threatened categories in the red box. So onto my Lazarus species that I've described or rediscovered, this so-called coelacanths of the plant world. Starting in 2013, I rediscovered this Aspalathus from the Longaberg, just to the east of Riversdale. It was only known from the type location that had been basically destroyed by pine plantations. And I was walking with the Mounted Club of South Africa there, and this legumes come up in the millions after fire. So glad to say that this plant is still alive and doing well. Cordycarpa, the scientific name, comes from the heart-shaped fruit, which you can see in the bottom left corner. Aspalathus or Polilia ignota was a long-lost species that was only known from 2 collections, hadn't been seen in, I think, 80-odd years. And I found it together with some crew colleagues near Indicale in 2016. And this is the species that inspired my master's project. And there's me and some of my colleagues photographing this quite magnificent bush. Then the real surprise uh, came in the week that we won the World Cup in 2019. So it was a double win for me. Uh, Australia cataracta had not been seen in about 200 years and was only known from the type collection somewhere near Tilbach. And while it looks extraordinarily beautiful, uh, in here, in these photos, this photo will tell you why it was so overlooked for 200 years. It is, honestly, if it's not in flower, it looks like a grass. Then, exactly 1 year to the day later, on Versveld Pass above Piketberg, also found this Aspalathus cordycarpa that hadn't been recorded in 100 and I think it was about 190 years almost. 1834 was the type collection and hadn't been recorded since then. And I know Crew recently also found another population of this species nearby. So it's also in decent health. Onto a few of the data deficient species that I've encountered over the years. I've kept these to a minimum to get to the exciting stuff later. Aspalathus sulfurea hadn't been collected or seen in about 80 years. And it's in an area of the Witzenberg Valley that's severely transformed for fruit orchards. And I luckily found a nice population, funny enough, growing right next to the road in 2021. And that's quite a nice sized bush and fairly nice sized flowers for Aspalathus as well. And Indigofera limosa was only known from the type collection by Pearson in the Luries Fontaine area of the Commiesberg Mountains from 1911. And exactly 110 years later, I managed to find this. And it was one of the very important species that I had to find for my doctoral studies on the genus Indigofera. Funny enough, on this exact same day, also found this critically endangered, potentially extinct Leobordia magnifica, just a few kilometers away from the Indigofera. Very few plants of these around, but the Commiesberg is so wide and inaccessible in parts that we hope that there are still some more populations of these to be found. You just have to go walking for them. And then finally, another critically endangered, potentially extinct species is Aspalathus compacta. Also hadn't been recorded in several decades. Its known location had also been destroyed by fruit orchards, and luckily quite a bit further to the east, almost at the base of Matrursburg, managed to find a decent population of this growing in some healthy fynbos. Okay, now on to my favorite part is finding and describing new species. So I started botanizing in 2012. So by 2013, it already found the first new species. This, myself and colleagues named after my home crew group, the Outramps, and it's only known from the base of the Swartberg near Karlstorp. A few months later, on Toverkop Mountain, also found this very unique Aspalathus growing low down between all the restios, and it was also described in the last few years, Aspalathus trigosa. Aspalathus albicephala being white-head, refers to the beautiful capitula of white blooms. This is a Gifberg endemic species, and unfortunately, most of its habitat has been transformed for rooibos tea plantation. So I found most of these plants growing right on the edge of rooibos tea plantations. I actually became aware of this species by photos uploaded by Tony Ribello onto iNaturalist that had been taken by another amateur botanist who had sadly passed away, but the photos landed up with Tony Ribello, and I managed to refine this species and describe it. Aspalathus fortunata was quite a fortunate find for me. Quite unfortunate timing because it was literally about 4 months before my master's had to be handed in. So I just per accident found this species growing in the Karoo, one population of about 300 plants, uh, and described it and did all the other analysis for it that I had already done for all the other Polylia species in time for submitting my MSc thesis. And it was happened to be post-fire, which in the Karoo is quite a rare occurrence. So it literally stood out. I was driving in my car and saw these silver bushes on the hill adjacent to the road, walked up to them, and boom, it's a Polylia. And then lastly, this one is yet to be described, but I'm being told that it is going to be named after me by Prof. Charles Sturton. It's a new Soralia species from the state level Wittenberg Mountains, between between Willamore and state level, deep high up in the mountains. And it's incredibly a 4-meter tall tree. But hardly anyone has ever botanized in these mountains, so I wasn't surprised when we managed to find it. Now moving on to Indigofera. This is a map that I quickly downloaded, indicating all the places that I had collected undescribed Indigofera species from South Africa. So you can see I've been around quite a bit. I'm yet to do the interior and Kalahari area, where there are a couple of additional undescribed species, but let's look at some of them. Just to recap the results from my PhD, we have found 57 new Indigofera species to science in the Greater Cape Floristic region, 6 new intraspecific taxa. I also resurrected 7 species from synonymy, 3 are being synonymized, giving us a total of approximately 145 taxa within the GCFR. Now, as conservation is one of my focuses, I've done preliminary conservation assessments for all of these 145 taxa, and this is basically what I've come up with. Out of those 145, 84 are least concerned and 61 are near threatened. But to show you the impact of taxonomic work, you'll see over 3/4 of accepted species are least concerned, and a very small proportion have a threat status, while when you look at our new species that we have described and are still busy describing, almost 2/3 of them are going to have some threat status. Once again, showing the value of, once we describe species, we can actually try and conserve them. And among the resurrected species, it's almost a 50-50 split between least concerned and having a threat status. Now getting onto the good part. So at the end of 2024 through to February 25, I undertook 3 months of field work in the summer rainfall region to expand my sampling, and managed to find a brand new species all by myself next to the road, actually, in the Soutpansberg. This is Indigofera minusculiflora. It is literally the smallest Indigofera flower that I've seen. And interestingly enough, the species, the only sister species to this species, grows in Namibia with a disjunct population in the Horn of Africa. So this was quite a find, seeing this. And as I do with all my botanical collections, or particularly of my Indigoferas, I do floral dissections of them, and need I say, this was painstaking and painful to do. Indigofera perfuriensis, I've included this just because it was an awesome experience. I got to walk around on the ground in Kruger Park on the border with Mozambique and see these beautiful plants. Diagnostic of this species is it's very small fruit with only 2 to 3 seeds in. Then the next one is an odd species from south of Pongola, in Indigofera ngomiana. The population I found it in was growing in the middle of a blue gum plantation. And believe it or not, the plants were thriving. So somehow it's managed to survive and thrive in this blue gum plantation. But I hope that the KZN crew can do some seed collecting of this and hopefully find some more populations, because it is almost certainly a very threatened species. This is probably one of my favorites from the Hotel Drakensberg. It's been proposed with a very horribly long name, Indigofera boreali drakensbergensis. I might change that as time goes. That was proposed by one of my colleagues. But this species is mostly found in Giant's Castle next to the streams. It's very close to Indigofera schachterii. So if you are hiking in that area, do keep an eye out for it. It flowers mostly around Christmas, New Year, and into later January. And finally, this is also a very beautiful new species, Indigofera liardi, that's only known from the streams above Hogsback. All these streams are surrounded by pine plantations, and unfortunately, the streams are also themselves invaded by rubus. So another extremely localized and extremely threatened species that we hope to describe in the next few years. And now, to shift the focus off me a little bit, I want to showcase some of the new species that have popped up through iNaturalist by colleagues and just citizen scientists in general. Delia Oosthuizen, who's a very passionate amateur botanist from Barberton area, found this beautiful species growing just to the west of Barberton, and I'll be calling it Indigofera thorncrofti. Next was Duncan Mackenzie. This is on the outskirts of Nelspruit, one of the largest cities in Mpumalanga, and it has never been previously recorded. And it is honestly one of my favorite Indigoferas, Indigofera rostripetala. The back of the standard has these beautiful golden hairs, and the keel petal curves up, and it's absolutely beautiful plant growing about 2 meters tall, and then again has not been recorded or described previously. Indigofera quadsiticola. This is coming from my colleagues in Crewe. I think they had a meeting up in Bovani Dam Nature Reserve, and a lot of them photographed this species and thought it was a common KZN species, but I followed up, collected it, and can confirm that it is indeed a distinct species endemic to the quartz outcrops in this local area. Then a record from Elmar van Rooyen near Clarence photographed this fairly odd but sort of indistinct Indigofera from near Clarence. I was driving to get to the site. I had just driven in from the Harry Smith side gate of Golden Gate, stopped next to the road, and found the plant growing there as well. And this is going to be called Indigofera chrysophylla, and that directly translates to Golden Gate. Truus van der Merwe, I'm sure a lot of you, especially from the north, know him very well. A great guy, and he found this undescribed species from the very top of the mountain, sort of to the southwest of Polokwane, and I made my way up the mountain as well, and can confirm that it is also a distinct species that I'll be naming after Truus. And then finally, Chris Whitehouse from Philipscorp on the property just opposite him found this new species that grows on Agedisberg, and I aptly named it Indigofera montisaurus, which is the direct translation for lizard mountain. Quite a fine little species, but very unique in its group by having these large flat leaflets. And I say large as a relative term, again, whenever I speak about Indigofera. And just added little bonus for everyone. We're finally done with the legumes. I at least have non-legume new species that I can take some credit for as well. back in 2021, I found this new little geyserizer from high up on Boersmansbos after a fire there, growing in the seeps with these beautiful cherry-colored flowers. And so we named it Geyseriza serracina. Cerasus is the genus for the cherries and alike. And then finally, my pride and joy is Morea Anastasia, which I found growing. It's literally 2 kilometers walk from my home in Stellenbosch, in an area that was previously under plantation. And as soon as they removed the plantation, some of these plants came back, and I love visiting them now every year. And almost every individual has a different flower pattern, and theirs growing in the shadow of Stellenboschberg. I'd like to use this opportunity to thank everyone that's contributed to my research, and in particular from my crew family. This was my first crew workshop in 2023, where it all started for me, and they've been with me all the way, helping me to get to where I am today. So I'm always thankful to them, and thank you very much for attending this talk today. I unfortunately have to excuse myself from the webinar now. As Charisse indicated earlier on, I'm not just a botanist, so I'm going to go and put on my dancing hat now and teach about 100 beginners the waltz. So thank you very much for listening to the talk. You're welcome to send me questions on my social media platforms, and I'll get back to you hopefully maybe tomorrow, because it's a 3.5-hour practice now. Thank you very much, Charisse, and good luck to all the talk speakers to follow.
Brian, thank you so much. Before you rush off, I just want to say what a fascinating talk that was. Never mind the dissections. I can't imagine the time and the patience that takes. Please rename Borrelia drakensbergensis. Oh my goodness, for people who use scientific names, that's going to be a nightmare. But I'm absolutely in love with Rosy Petula. What a beautiful plant. Congratulations on you having a plant named after you. It was fascinating just hearing how you decide on plant names. I think you're very lucky. Peas find you. I've never seen so many, by the by discoveries. You're obviously just in the right place at the right time. And of course, acknowledging the contributions that crew and iNaturalists do. And then, Brian, as a last thing, I have to say it, may peace be with you.
Thank you, Charisse, and thanks for arranging the webinar, and goodbye to everyone that's online.
Thanks. And then over to our next speaker, JP Leroux. Welcome, JP, all the way from Nieuwertville. He's sitting there joining us this evening. JP is a biodiversity officer and a conservationist practitioner. He's based in the Northern Cape of South Africa. He's working in and around the greater Namaqualand region, where he is this evening, as I said. He focuses on practical field-based conservation in arid and semi-arid ecosystems. His work spans biodiversity stewardship, rangeland restoration, ecological monitoring, and collaboration with farming communities to build resilience in working landscapes. He has a particular interest in the botanical fieldwork, including post-fire surveys and the rediscovery of historically collected plant species. And thereby, he's contributing to the renewed understanding of Namaqualand's unique flora. JP brings a practical, solutions-based perspective to biodiversity conservation in some of South Africa's most fragile and extraordinary landscapes. And each of our speakers tonight has a little extra something special. Here, JP supports coastal and wetland bird monitoring efforts in the Northern Cape. Well, over to you, JP. Thank you so much.
Right, good afternoon, everyone. Talking to you all the way from Nieuwertville. And I'll be talking about the 1 or 2 rediscoveries I have, and then all of the other contributions we make just by being out in the field. So just a quick overview of what I'll be talking about, just a little bio on me, just so you know why I'm out in the field doing what I'm doing. A bit about the Plasmatocarpus rediscovery, species data contributions, that it's not always just about rediscovering species, the importance of boots on the ground, the role of citizen science, what happens after you've generated that data, and then the importance of external funding, and then some of the other missing species we are still looking for. Lastly, I'll just do some key takeaways. So to start off with, I've been in the conservation sector for 10 years now. Straight out of varsity into conservation. I started out with the Endangered Wildlife Trust, where my work was really species focused. It was firstly in aquatic ecology, working on the rivers up in Groot Mariku in the Northwest Province, and that shifted to the drylands, where it was much more species focused. Then moved over to the Department of Environmental Affairs of the Northern Cape, or DAERL, working as a biodiversity stewardship officer, which was now much more landscape focused. The reason for that being was finding all of these interesting species, and how do you protect all of them? Well, you need to protect habitat to protect the species, because sometimes, like you've seen with Brian's talk now, we still don't know what's out there to be found. Like I said, I'm based in Evertville. Most of my work happens in the succulent career. This is where the funding that we currently have from the WWF Leslie or Succulent Career Trust focuses. So yeah, like I said, started out with the EWT and in the dryland. So my focus was on the dryland species, like the speckled dwarf tortoise, golden moles, riverine rabbits, and the Belangeri. I can't remember the Afrikaans and the English name. But yeah, working on these species led me to my first rediscovery, and it was done with the team at the Endangered Wildlife Trust. By that time, when we made it public, I was already with the department, but it was a few years of work trying to define this golden mole species. There's a few on the list, but in 2023, after a lot of field work, doing almost the whole west coastline from Lambert's Bay all the way to Port Nolloth, we found this species again on the beach in Port Nolloth. It was lost to science for almost 80 years, and yeah, we did our surveys and eventually managed to verify it with the use of eDNA. It's a new technique being used all over in the conservation sector, and yeah, it's proven very helpful in finding some of these really cryptic species. But on to what I'm doing now. So like I said, finding these species just made me a bit more motivated to secure landscapes, and we're trying to get as many areas secured as possible. So my main focus now is implementing the Northern Cape Protected Area Expansion Strategy, trying to secure protected areas all over the Northern Cape. Protected areas like Papkaarsfontein, which is just adjacent to the property where we found this Prismatocarpus species, and then also supporting our provincial nature reserves. So part of my work is supporting our provincial nature reserves, and that's why the reason why I was out in the field that day when I found this species. So I was actually busy with monitoring of Clivia mirabilis. As you know, we've been kept very busy with poaching over the last few years. It's died down a little bit. I don't want to say that out too loud, but this is a talk all on its own. But that was the reason I was out in the field. And when I'm out in the field, I always use the opportunity to bioblitz, even if it's for 5 minutes or a few hours. When I'm out in the field, I have the opportunity, even if it's just stopping on the side of the road, jumping out and taking a picture of something, it contributes. The reason I stopped, because on my way down to the reserve, there's an area that burnt in 2024. It was over January, so it's a very dry time of the year, and I was actually out looking for some of the pelargonium species that we have here in Evertville. There's 40 plus species that we know of that should be here. Most of them have already been found. Some of them still need to be found. I was looking for Pelargonium glabrophyllum. It is one of the species that has a few documented records, but you don't always find the flowers and the leaves of these species at the same time. So doing searches at different times of the year, then you find the flowers, and then there's actually proper photos of the species, because most of the surveys happen over December or during August and September, when it's flower season here in Nivotville, and that's when we have most of our researchers and botanists coming to this area. So that's just the area that I was in, burnt quite extensively. Nivotville is right on the edge of the Greater Cape Floristic region. So this is the last of the arid fynbos that you find before you go into the Northern Cape. So it's a transitional area between fynbos and succulent karoo. So we have a lot of very interesting endemic species in this area. I did manage to find one of the other pelargoniums I was looking for that was in flower, but then came across this very, like with Brian Stork, a species that doesn't look like much. Tried to take some very close, pretty pictures. And yeah, I found another species of the same genus, uploaded that, but uploaded this to INAT without really knowing what it was kind of sure that it was Prismatocarpus, but not 100% sure. I then got contacted by Pierre Ichu, who added the ID on iNaturalist and said that it's Prismatocarpus fastigiatus. Species I haven't heard of, but according to him, it was last collected in 1830. It was described by Jan Frans de Grey and not recorded for nearly 200 years. It was presumed to be possibly extinct or extremely rare. I then went back to the site where I found it and tried to take my best pictures as possible, because I really wanted to highlight the benefits of being out in the field and finding a species that was lost. Over the last year, there's been few rediscoveries of species in the Northern Cape and discoveries of new species, reptiles. And I felt that there's not enough of a hoo-ha being made about plant species being rediscovered. And yeah, this actually did quite well on social media, and people really appreciated the rediscovery. So why was it missed? So the main reason is the incorrect historical locality. The searches happened in the wrong place, in the wrong region for the species. So initially it was described to be found in an area in the Western Cape, Bredasdorp, and there was a small reference to an area called the Eyen Valley. We can now, from that, say that they probably referenced the Eyen Valley, which is here close to Nivotville, so probably 20 kilometers from where I found the species, an area called Loganberg, which also back in the day was known as Eyen Valley. The surveys that took part that happened for this species also happened in winter, and the species is found to flower in midsummer, so the surveys also happen at the wrong time. There's limited seasonal field work in Nivotville, like I said. People usually just come here August, September to watch the massive displays of really interesting bulbs here. And the rest of the year, it's dry and doesn't look as pretty as it does in flower season, but there's a lot of interesting stuff to be found. And just to put that in perspective, Bredasdorp is almost 300 kilometers from Nivotville, so it was a long way off from where the initial searches took place for the species. But finding a species has conservation implications, so the species is still likely rare. When we found it, there was only about 50 individuals that we can find in quite a large area, in the area that burnt. We don't know what the dependency on fires are at the moment, and the species is still, given that this is a really big area for rooibos production, there is still a chance of habitat loss going on. Therefore, we require assessments to see if the species maybe occurs further out. The spot where we found the species is surrounded by the provincial nature reserve and private protected areas. So hopefully if we find it in one of those areas, then at least it is in a protected area. But this also gives us the opportunity to protect the species in situ and the property where it's been found, so we can investigate that. So yeah, that was Prismatocarpus. So the rediscovery of the species, this is kind of like a one in a thousand, where you, an amateur botanist like me would find a unique or new species. But my next part of my talk would focus more on the contributions we can all make. So species contributions doesn't always have to be very flashy and finding new species or finding lost species. It can be as simple as finding species that are cryptic. This is a species of Pictonaria mahonii. In the previous place that I lived, I found this stapeliad growing almost 20 meters from my house, and I did return visits for months waiting for this thing to flower. Eventually saw the flowers popping up and took photos of the flowers and was able to ID it as the species that's hardly ever seen. We also can contribute to data deficient species. So species like this Disa spatulata, subspecies spatulata, which is found here in Evatville. It's not a super rare species, but it's a species that you don't often come across. And the area that it was found in is an area where the species hasn't been previously known to occur. So you can also, like I said, with that species, contribute to range expansions for species. This is Satyrium corifolium. As you can see, there's a little bit of a map from INAT that I took. So most of the observations for the species is in the Western Cape and along the coast. And then you see one observation all the way up there above Vredendal. That's Nieuwoudtville, that little block. And that's where I found this species, way out, probably 100 kilometers from the other known location. You also contribute in the way of phenotypic variation. So this is Romulea pudica. So for the people that know Romuleas, so the Romulea pudicas that you usually find here in Nieuwoudtville are red, and this is a variation that's completely white. So you can contribute in that way as well. And then in more general terms, species of conservation concern and finding local endemic species. It's about generating data on those species and finding new localities for them, even if it's just expanding the locality by a few kilometers. It does benefit a lot about what we know of the species. Then finding species that are in restricted areas like this Scalobata acanthocada. This is a species that's known to be in Namibia, but it's found along the west coast of the Northern Cape. So this was close to Alexander Bay, where we found this actually on a mining site. So this just shows that sometimes you have restricted access to areas where other people really can't come, even if it's just that you know someone that owns a private piece of property. And if you take some photos there, there's a good likelihood that you'd find something that not a lot of people have found before. But then there's also a problem for us amateur botanists, and that's when we find species that's undescribed. So here in Nieuwoudtville, with all of the surveys I've done and botanizing and bioblitzing, I found 3 new Pilastus species. It's more commonly known as the rain spiders. So there's one that's a communal one, more of the dryland rain spiders, and then another one we found on one of the protected areas. And yeah, this just kind of shows, I added this slide just to show that I might not know a lot about spiders, but I can take the pictures and I can upload it and it gets to the right people. So obviously this shows that Nieuwoudtville is quite a good area for speciation for the Pilastus genus. So the people doing research on the species, this is where they need to come to see why there's so many different or undescribed species here. But this can only be done with boots on the ground. So fieldwork is irreplaceable in a time where we live now, where the time you spent behind the computer will one day be replaced by AI. AI can't replace boots on the ground in the field doing research. Discoveries might often be incidental, but whatever else you find along the way contributes to biodiversity data. Post-fire areas reveal species. Like I said, with this area, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Areas in Nieuwoudtwal, it's a super arid area for fynbos that requires fires, but this just means that the fires that do break out here, and when it does burn, it's in areas that might have not burned in the last 80 years, and that post-fire surveys is super important to find species that haven't been recorded in 80 plus years because it hasn't burned. Year-round presence matters. For me, it helps, like I said, with that species at the top, the Pictonaria. It can sometimes just be a few meters from your house. So you're present in an area. If you spend some time there, you'll start realizing, okay, this thing is odd. I haven't seen this before. And continued surveys throughout the year, going out in drier times and going out after fire events and just having that flexibility. That's where the boots on the ground really matters. But this is all funding dependent. So for me, I work through the department and the department gets funded. And that's how I get my boots on the ground. But this is not an option for everyone. So this is why citizen science is so important. So platforms like iNaturalist enables rapid IDs or IDs of species that aren't known, and then allows for the correct people to go out and collect specimens and describe those species. It connects you with global experts or local experts. A lot of the species, especially if we're looking at some of the non-plant species, the experts are usually based abroad. And these platforms encourage data sharing. So this is an open platform that's available for everyone. Citizens can access this, the researchers, and this goes a long way in making this much more accessible for everyone. Every record counts. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be a rediscovery to be worthwhile. It can be add to the distribution data, what's known of the species when it flowers. There's a whole list of ways you can contribute to species data. And this is how, in the end, one observation can solve a 200-year mystery, like with the Prismatocarpus that I rediscovered. It goes beyond documentation. It expands on the known distributions, corrects historical records, like with Prismatocarpus. We were looking at in the wrong area, improves ecological understanding of when the species comes out, like the species has a high likelihood of having a relationship with fires and being a post-fire species, and it informs conservation. So it informs the broader work that I do. The biodiversity data that's generated from this supports spatial planning. It identifies priority areas for us to work in, guides expansion strategies, and we cannot protect what we don't know exists. So the more data we generate, the more info we have, and the more precise we can implement our conservation strategies. An example of this is our Northern Cape Critical Biodiversity Areas map. So you can see there's a whole bunch of different colors, but the dark green color is the Critical Biodiversity Area 1s, and the red is the Critical Biodiversity Areas 2, and that's mostly informed by species. So there's either endangered or critically endangered species in that areas, and that's why it's listed. And a lot of the other areas are listed as ecological support areas or other natural areas, and this is where we need data. So when we're out in the field, if you look at a map of the biodiversity data of South Africa, the top, more arid section of the Northern Cape has these massive blank spots where we still need boots on the ground or citizen science to go out and look for species. But yeah, this can only be done most of the time through external funding. For me, it's through the WWF Lesile Succulent Karoo Trust support, which focuses my work in the succulent karoo. It enables my field work, and yeah, so whether it's going out for a meeting or actually going out to do biodiversity assessments for properties that we want to declare, it allows me to be out in the field and to generate data. External funding sustains our conservation efforts, and it's critical for implementation. For example, the Northern Cape Protected Area expansion strategy that I talked about. But yeah, here in Nivotville, there are still missing species, many species listed as critically endangered or presumed extinct, or just data deficient species. For the Nivotville area, there's around 3 more species that I know of that still need to be found, but there are still quite a lot that we still don't know of this area, and there's places where there haven't been boots on the ground. So how many of these species are truly extinct versus just undiscovered? We don't know. We haven't looked yet. Are we looking in the right places at the right times, or are we looking at all? It's just an example of sometimes you have data that you can access to go and look for these species. At least you have a reference, but for some species there aren't any. So with Plasmatocarpus rediscovery, at least we are now able to have herbarium examples, and yeah, that goes a long way in knowing what is available for the species. So just my key takeaways: the citizen science is powerful, fieldwork is essential, data drives the decisions we make, especially on a provincial and then a national level in terms of where we conserve. Rediscoveries matter. It highlights the work that the conservationists do, and it's good stories that come out. It's always doom and gloom from the conservation sector, but yeah, it's nice when we can share positive stories, and collaboration is key. So platforms like iNaturalist make collaboration much more easy between scientists and the general public. That's all from me. My last closing remark is that this discovery wasn't luck. It was a result of being in the field at the right time and sharing that observation. And sometimes we can all contribute to. And that's something we can all contribute to. Sorry. Right. That's all from my side.
JP, if you would turn your video on, just so I can look you in the eye while I say how inspiring you have been. Absolutely inspiring through your own dedicated work and your takeaways and just how you've presented the whole story. You have made at least 2/3 of us, if not all of us, want to put on our boots and come help you find species in Nivotville, from rain spiders to riverine rabbits. And that Cryptus stapeliad had me going like, this was so beautiful. Thank you for the inspiration and for your time and representing your area and your work so well. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. For some reason, I don't know why my video doesn't want to work, but yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone saw enough of my face on the adverts. But
yeah. That's all very well. Thank you so much. And then we're on to our third speaker, Dr. Ren Hoekstra, and I'm going to say his extramural activity is the fact that he's a medical doctor. Actually, his extramural is the fact that he's an amateur botanist. But I prefer to focus on the botany part because Ren has done some really excellent work as well. He's based in Cape Town and he spends much of his free time exploring the rugged mountains of the Cape. His passion for plants took root in about 2021 when he joined the Custodians for Rare and Endangered Wildflowers, which is CREW. His work with CREW involves extensive field surveys in the remote Cape Mountains, where the group has contributed to the rediscovery of numerous lost and severely threatened plants, as well as the discovery of several possibly new species. His research currently focuses on the taxonomy and conservation of the genus Erica and Diosmiae, the buchus, and Ren is passionate about encouraging young nature lovers to actively explore and engage with our biodiversity, and hopes to inspire a greater interest in plant conservation and in citizen science. Well done, Ren, and over to you.
So as Cherise kindly introduced me, my name is Ren Hoekstra. I'm an amateur botanist with a special interest in ericas and buchus, and much like Brian, a large part of my research involves hunting for long-lost and undescribed species in the Cape Mountains, sometimes coming across brand new species. And I work with my research team to get these plants formally described and conserved. So today I'll be presenting on these novelties with a focus on the genus Erica. So a quick overview of the talk. This talk will be an exhibition of the long-lost and undescribed species that my team and I have come across over the past 4 years. I'll talk about my own background and will introduce some of the work done by an incredible citizen science group called CREW, which I'm sure many of you are already familiar with, and which has been instrumental to these discoveries. I'll give some quick disclaimers, and then I'll share some of the long-lost Ericas that we've had the fortune to uncover over the past few years. I'll share some of the highly localized threatened plants that we've found and monitored as part of the CREW program, and then I'll move on to the novelties, the new and undescribed plants that we've had the fortune to find over the years. I'll cover the rediscovered novelties, so those species that had been previously discovered but have not been named yet, and then I'll cover those that my team and I have had the fortune to discover during my fieldwork, including ericas and other feignable species, particularly amongst the buhus. And I'll end off with a brief description of the work that my research group does to get these plants formally described and conserved. So CREW stands for Custodians of Rare and Endangered Wildflowers. It is a citizen science program that works with researchers, rangers, horticulturists, students, and other volunteers to monitor and protect threatened plant species. CREW is an incredibly dynamic and diverse group of people with an impressive age range and an assortment of backgrounds, both professional and amateur. Our work entails regular field trips to sites with natural vegetation, with a focus on sites known to host threatened plants, where we conduct systematic site surveys. The data generated in these outings then get incorporated into red list assessments, which are critical for informing land use decisions and conservation planning. So I joined CREW in 2021, where I was quickly roped into the unofficial high altitude team, which covered the montane fynbos, particularly the unique ericaceous and subalpine fynbos habitats. These are seldom surveyed due to their remoteness and difficult access, but they house some of the most unique flora in the region. This is particularly true for Erica, which of course dominates the ericaceous zone and is a key component of the subalpine zone in the high mountains of the Cape. Many highly localized endemic plants occur in both of these habitat types, with taxa frequently being restricted to single isolated peaks. Needless to say, the exposure to these remarkable habitats, dominated by ericas, sparked an interest in the genus in me, and I subsequently specialized in this taxon and found myself doing more formal taxonomic research. It is in these mysterious montane habitats where the majority of ericas that I'll be presenting today occur. So some quick disclaimers before I talk about all the rediscovered and new species. So one, all of the dates and records that I refer to in this presentation are to the best of my knowledge based on reviews of herbarium collections, consultation with taxon specialists, red list data, iNaturalist, and more comprehensive online databases like GBIF. Two, whenever I refer to a new or an undescribed species, these are putative, meaning to the best of our current knowledge they are unique, but their novelty still needs to be confirmed through a certain methodology and peer review process. There are many examples of indistinct species boundaries, especially in ericas, making it difficult to determine when something should be a new species or not, so we almost always need to do molecular studies to confirm this. Over the years, we've had a few cases of false novelties, so when a plant is thought to be new, but later confirmed not to be. We have examples of intraspecific variation, where we find there's not enough evidence to call something a new species, but rather just a variation within the same species. For example, this is something we often see with color and size variation in Erica. And of course, there are hybrids. So often we can tease these out before doing more in-depth molecular studies, but every now and then we go through the entire process only to find that, oh, it's a hybrid. And that's simply the nature of this kind of work. So 3, this is just a glimpse into the world of novel taxa in Erica and in the fynbos, and is in no way an exhaustive list. Unfortunately, we do have a time limit to adhere to. And lastly, for all of our outings, we follow a very strict protocol for land access, and we greatly value the relationships we have with Cape Nature and private landowners that facilitate this access. and I wish to acknowledge these. I would also like to acknowledge Crew, my research team, the Goerits Cluster Biosphere Reserve that funded many of our outings, and of course all the wonderfully inspiring people that I've met along the way. For the photos used in this presentation, all of the plant photos are my own, and all of the people photos are used with permission from Crew. Okay, so now we can get started. And I'm sure some of you have come across this article highlighting the incredible work done through the collaborative efforts between Cape Nature and Crew. It talks about the rediscovery of Erica cunoniensis, a rare and threatened species from the Kogelberg Nature Reserve, which was recently uncovered after just under 40 years. This is a great introduction to the type of stories of rediscovery I want to share with you today. So let's start with the major rediscoveries in Erica over the past 4 years. These are all stories of long-lost Ericas, just like Erica cunoniensis, and while they don't always make it into the news, I think they are certainly worth sharing. Erica otaniqua is a rare species, known from only 4 subpopulations, and last recorded in 1992 by Jan Vlok in the Otaniqua Mountains close to George. When I started with Crew in 2021, this was one of the first major targets that I was given, and we were fortunate to finally uncover it again in 2022, about 30 years later. So it grows at high altitude in the Otaniquas and is probably not threatened. The next 4 species are all from the high mountains behind Swellendam, a remarkably unique section of the Langeberg range. In 1815, William Burchell set out on a week-long outing into these mountains, which was a highly productive trip yielding more than 100 botanical type collections. A number of these collections were made from what he called Craggy Peak, and even today we have no idea which peak this actually refers to, although the most likely candidate is Tolvierkop. The fairly recently published biographical epic, Burchell's African Odyssey, talks about the rare Erica ophylla, which you can see the type collection here, which he collected on this outing and which was last recorded in 1974. Being another Crew target, after almost 50 years, this unique plant was finally found again on the ridge line leading to Tolvierkop in 2023. And last year, a new subpopulation was found on Hermitage Peak, which is just close by. Erica langebergensis is only known from a single collection made in 1973 by the prolific botanical collector Elsie Esterhuizen on one of the highest peaks in the Langeberg range, Leeuwrivierberg. Last year in December, after more than 40 years of being lost, this plant was finally rediscovered at its type locality, and a new subpopulation was found on Misty Peak. This represents the first ever population data for this species, making it a very significant find. You'll notice that on some slides I've added probably not threatened or encroaching pines as on this one. And as part of our work for Crew, we monitor various threats to plants, including invasive alien plants such as pines and hackia, urban expansion, improper fire management, poaching, climate change, and so on. And while the subalpine or high altitude fynbos species generally face fewer immediate threats compared to lowland species, our monitoring revealed that this unique section of the Langeberg range has unfortunately become heavily burdened by encroaching pines, and these pose a very real threat to all of these highly localized endemic plants. Another one of Burchell's 1815 collections was Erica crassisepala. This was thought to be lost for more than a century, with the last confirmed herbarium record being from 1894. This was of course another triumph for Crew, as it was found again in 2022, and subsequently numerous new subpopulations were found, significantly extending its range all the way to the Kamanasi, which is in the eastern plain Karoo. Probably the most elusive Erica of all is Erica comata, a plant which has not been seen since Burchell's 1815 collection. So again, Burchell's notes were frustratingly vague, as he referred to a summit of a mountain peak near Swellendam. Now, more than 210 years later, Erica comata has finally been rediscovered on Leeuwrivierberg. Unfortunately, once again, this beautiful species is threatened by encroaching pines. Next, I'm going to briefly cover some major finds by Crew over the past 3 years. These are all highly localized and threatened species that were on our target list to monitor, many of which have also not been seen for a few decades. Ericus vallis aranearum is a naturally rare species, well conserved within the Kogelberg Biosphere Reserve, but known from a single subpopulation that has only 15 mature individuals. In other words, as far as we know, there are only 15 plants of this species in the entire world. The last record for this species was in 2013, and Crew was fortunate to find it again earlier this year. Erica perplexa is also only known from a single, very small localized subpopulation of only 20 plants close to Grabo, which was found again in 2023. These two species, Erica orthiocola and Erica cincta, are both extremely localized to single small populations where their numbers are only in the low hundreds. Erica orthiocola has had regular monitoring and is unfortunately threatened by the worsening pine invasion in the Refuge van Red range where it occurs. Last year, Erica cincta was finally rediscovered on Kogelberg Peak after 27 years. Fortunately, it does not appear to be threatened. Brunia barnardii is an extremely rare plant, known from one site only, again in the high peaks behind Swellendam, and earlier this year a new subpopulation of approximately 500 plants was discovered on top of Sieubrock Mountain. Anderbergia phallax is another plant thought to be restricted to a single location and until recently was only known from one collection from Misty Peak. This range was extended last year all the way to Langeberg Peak, which sits behind Albertina, a significant extension for a plant previously thought to be so localized. So while the new subpopulations are quite large for both of these plants, they are both unfortunately threatened by encroaching pines. So the next few slides are going to be a sneak peek into the world of undescribed ericas. These are all ericas that have not been named yet and were only recently rediscovered as part of my research team's work. So starting us off, once again we find ourselves in the high peaks behind Swellendam, where Erica ophidia occurs. It is only known from one collection by Elsie Esterhazen back in 1972 and was rediscovered last year. My manuscript name for this species is Ophidia, which means little snake. On the same trip, we found the beautiful Erica helmii, another undescribed Erica from the top of Misty Peak, which I've named after another prolific collector, Nick Helm, who made the last record of this plant in 1999. It is very localized to the wetland at the top of the mountain and is unfortunately also threatened by encroaching pines. What is quite special about this species is that it only flowers in late winter, meaning we had to hike through snow and ice to see it in flower. Moving into the Klein Karoo now, all the way to the Kamanassi, which is close to Uniondale, we have Erica regulus, only known from a single collection back in 1951, again by Elsie Esterhazen. This one is quite close to my heart, as it was the first undescribed Erica I came across, and sparked the whole journey into more formal taxonomic research. It was rediscovered in 2022 during an impromptu trip up the Kamanassi. It is very localized to the highest peak in the Kamanassi called Mannetjiesberg, and fortunately it does not appear to be threatened. Erica aranea is a very special plant from the Klein Swartberg. It is known from a single collection from an overhang at the top of an immense gully between Toverkop and Kootveldberg, which forms part of the last half of the Klein Swartberg traverse. We undertook this grueling traverse last year, and you can appreciate the magnitude of those mountains in this photo, with one of my fellow hikers standing here, for scale. It has an interesting habit with a web-like growth in corners and on the ceiling of the overhang, with the old branches taking on a grey, almost cobweb-like look. Hence the manuscript name Aranea, meaning spiderweb. Our last one from the Klein Karoo is Erica obscurata, a rare plant that is found in permanent shade under rocks in the middle to upper slopes around Meyringspoort in the Groot Swartberg. It is probably not threatened. So next up, we have two newly discovered species, Erica altimontana and Erica nebulosa. So these are both brand new species discovered during last year's fieldwork, once again in the high Swellendam peaks. Erica altimontana, meaning tall mountain, is from the very top of Leeuwrivierberg, and Erica nebulosa, meaning misty, cloudy, is from the top of Misty Peak. I find both of them very charming, and it's exciting to think that such charismatic plants are still being discovered in the Cape. Both of them are unfortunately threatened by encroaching pines. So now I'll quickly run through the last few undescribed plants that we've recently uncovered or newly discovered over the past few years. And the first of our buchus is Euchetus petrophylla, discovered on one of my outings to the northern Cederberg close to Algeria in 2022. It has a very distinct wand-like habit and has subsequently also been recorded from Pakai's Pass. It's probably not threatened. Passerina maculomontana is only known from a high peak in the Groot Swartberg called Kolberg, for which it is named. It was only discovered last year while we were looking for Erica obscurata, the undescribed Erica from Meiringspoort. Fortunately, it occurs in the pristine fynbos of the eastern Groot Swartberg and is probably not threatened either. So as I mentioned earlier, this is not an exhaustive list, and I simply don't have enough time to go through all of the undescribed buchus. But here's a quick visual taster of some of the new Agathosma species from the Klein Karoo. This first one is from Antonisberg, which is just north of the Baviaanskloof. These three are all from the Rooiberg Pass. This beautiful Agathosma is from Kamanasi, and this one is from the northern Langeberg. So after all of this excitement about new and undescribed species, almost all of them being threatened, the obvious question is, how do we actually get them described, and how do we conserve them? So the process starts with fieldwork and collecting both herbarium specimens and DNA samples. Once we've done a careful review of existing herbarium material and integrated our geographical distribution and ecological data, we perform molecular tests, which in our case can be anything from good old Sanger sequencing to more precise contemporary methods like target capture. We then construct a phylogeny, which may support or reject our hypothesis that the species is distinct. And for every new taxon described, we also do a comprehensive conservation assessment, which further informs conservation planning for that species. This was a paper that we published last year, where we described 3 new species following this exact methodology. And I just want to briefly acknowledge my 3 co-authors, Seth Maske, Mike Peary, and Jan Vlok. And to finish things off, I'll talk about 2 of the 3 species that we described in this paper. The first one, Erica hessequa, is a highly localized species only known from the mountains north of Albertina, where it grows amongst craggy rocks at high altitude. Our current estimates put the global population of this species at just 50 individuals, and unfortunately the middle slopes of the eastern Langeberg are still overrun by pines. It is therefore critically endangered under criterion D. Erica arida is only known from the mountains north of the Doringrivier catchment area, which is just east of Barrydale. It is only known from a few records, most of them by Jill Blino, who discovered the species in the early 2000s. The 3 known subpopulations for this species are all very small, and our minimum estimate for its global population currently sits at 100 individuals only. Unfortunately, the marshland in the catchment area is heavily infested with invasive Hackia, with a significant encroachment up to the middle south-facing slopes where Erica arida occurs. This poses a major threat and earns it a threat status of critically endangered B1AB3. So this is one of the last slides, and it asks a follow-up question, just to round everything off. And that is, what are the first steps towards conserving fynbos? And not just the exciting new species on the mountain peaks, but also the critically endangered habitats like lowland fynbos. Well, for one, it takes a dedicated group of passionate individuals like crew that can do the foundational work. It takes teamwork, and a little publicity always helps, especially to generate public interest and encourage funding. It takes multidisciplinary integration with taxonomists, conservation ecologists, rangers, farmers, and community members. And it takes individual drive. Even the smallest contribution, whether you're cutting down a pine tree or uploading a picture on iNaturalist, can make a big difference. Of course, this only lays the foundation, and larger systemic factors such as policy change, large-scale alien clearing, land use decision-making, funding, and more funding all needs to follow for more effective long-term conservation. But if we can get the ball rolling, we are already making a significant difference. And knowing what we need to conserve and how best to conserve it is a great starting point. My work with my research group and with crew has been incredibly rewarding, and I hope that this sneak peek into my own world of ericas has demonstrated the uniqueness and wonder of our fynbos, and hopefully inspired some interest in plant conservation and citizen science. If you want to find out more about citizen science or want to get involved with crew, please feel free to contact either Ishmael, the manager of the Cape Floristic region, whose email address is right at the top here, or the champion for your respective region. I'll leave these details on the last slide. Briefly, these are my references. And thank you again for this opportunity to talk.
Wasn't it exciting? All these new species? I'm going to do one like this again, promise. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.